So I'm going to talk a little bit, just a short talk this evening on the theme or the topic of the stories we tell ourselves and the difference between the data and the story and what that has to do with suffering. A lot. Everything. Pretty much everything. And I'll start with a story from my work today. Some of you know that my work is mainly involved in psychology work, and today I was actually working with a couple in the room in my office on couples therapy, and they're struggling. They're having a tough time. Not uncommon when people come for couples therapy, and the logistics are both in their early 30s, 1-year-old child, their first child. One of them has a very demanding job in law enforcement, and the other one is working on their PhD while attempting to be the primary stay-at-home parent of the new child. And there's dogs and cats and household demands and all the things of being a family. And they were sharing with me just the amount of, one of them said, you know, we're doing just an incredible amount of scorekeeping. And, so one of them would come home and the other one would be very tired and say, I need you to do this and this and this. And they would say, yeah, but I do this and this and this. So all this scorekeeping. But I do the shopping, I do the cooking. Yeah, but I'm with our child almost all day. Yeah, but I'm bringing in the primary money, and just back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And they were speaking about it very eloquently and with a lot of grace, a lot of tears, and a lot of just frustration, and not anger so much as exhaustion and disconnect, and saying, I worry that we're not going to make it. And then partway through the session, one of them started to tell the story in a different way, just organically. And she started to say, maybe we need to reframe it. Maybe we need to realize that we chose this life. We each chose the careers we're in. I chose to be doing my PhD. We chose to move because of your work to South Island. We've got a beautiful house. We've got a healthy child. We chose this life, and yet we're complaining about the demands and the logistics that come with this life, and we're making ourselves incredibly miserable. What would it be? And this was their words. She had a moment of great brilliance in the session today. I just got to sit back and watch with admiration. Well, she said, what if we reframe it? What if we, instead of saying, I got up with her last time in the middle of the night when the baby cries, they say, don't worry, honey, I got this. I'll get up with her. And we were talking about that, and it was something that I thought was worth bringing to each and every one of us, is how often do we look at our lives, which for the most part we've chosen. Now, we may have had circumstances out of our control, we may have had tragedy, we may have been fired, evicted, had our house burned down. So I'm not saying we choose all of it, but for the most part, we had some or quite a bit of agency, quite a bit of opportunity to choose what we do in our retirement or in our working life, to choose maybe where we want to live and how we want to live within reason. And yet how often, I am guilty of this sometimes, how often do we find ourselves in these incredibly amazing lives we've all got, given that we're in the top 3% of persons in the world in terms of the ease of our life, our drinking water, the beautiful environment, we've got food, we've got shelter, we live in a non-war-torn country at this time, and hopefully maybe forever, and so on. We're so incredibly lucky, privileged, whatever adjective you want to use. We have profoundly easy lives as middle-class Canadians or wherever we might fall. And yet, how often do I find myself thinking, I've got to do this today, and it's so tiring, and I'm so overwhelmed, right? I'm so busy, I'm so tired, there's so much to do, and sometimes finding ourselves maybe feeling self-pitying or tired or worn out or angry or grumpy because we've got to pick our child up from school and it's inconvenient. We love our kid, but it's inconvenient to leave right now and go pick them up or after their activity, or that we're feeling, I've got to clean out the cat box. These people were talking about who does the cat box in their relationship, something I relate to well in my relationship. And we talked about it. We had a beautiful conversation together about this breakthrough that this very wise woman had. And her wife was like, that's a pretty big breakthrough, honey, about It's how we're approaching our life that's the problem. It's not our life that's the problem. It's not really the incredible demands of your work. It's not really the incredible demands of my PhD that I'm finding a heck of a time getting to between our child who's had croup and has had this and has been coughing and not sleeping through the night, and the kids and the dogs and the cats. And just that it turned into misery. It turned into picking. It turned into what one marriage therapist calls righteous indignation. Like, I do everything, and, martyrdom, and oh, poor me. And then the other one becomes innocent victim. No matter what I do, it's not enough. You're always mad at me. It doesn't have to be a romantic relationship. In work, in your own head, your relationship with the little bean inside here. Where do we fall into this, oh, poor me, it's all so hard? Did any of us have to cross enemy lines and risk stepping on landmines to get here tonight? Did any of us risk in a very real way being physically or sexually assaulted on the way here? It is a small chance, yes, I'm not naive nor stupid. But is it like a raging fear for each of us getting here tonight? No. Were we afraid we'd be killed by wild animals on the way here? No. Are we afraid when we go home that we could drink the water that we have access to and die of dysentery? For the most part, no. So when we are caught in our suffering of the story we're telling ourselves, and this is what this very wise person came to today in the session, where she said, what if we reframe it? Which is another way of saying, what if I tell a different story? What if instead of, I'm so exhausted and I can't get to my studies and you're working 14 hours, which I don't blame you for, it's part of your job, but when you get home I need you to take over, and sometimes you come in and you just notice the house is messy and I want to strangle you. What if I reframe it? What if I reframe it and say, look how blessed we are. Yes, we're tired. Yes, we're worn out some of the time. I'm not denying that. But how do we relate to this reality? How do we relate to the data of it feeling like there's too much to do and not enough hours? Can anybody relate to that? Retired or not retired? Some of the busiest people I know are my retired friends. It's like they're, I don't know how I ever got anything done when I actually had a job because I can't get anything done now. But what about when we change the story? And so I shared with this couple something I came across. It's not my idea. I was wise enough to notice it and think it was a really useful little thought experiment. And the theme tonight, the Dharma theme, is what is the data and what is the story we tell ourselves about the data, and does that lead away from suffering, which would be wholesome, or does it lead towards more suffering, which is unwholesome? So if the data is we're so blessed to have 2 careers we love and a healthy baby and a beautiful house, we're also very busy and tired sometimes, we're so blessed. The data remains the same, but the story, the interpretation, is a much more wholesome one. So back to this little thing I saw, I don't know, about 2 years ago, and it talked about a lovely little refrain. And some of you may have heard me share this before. I may have shared it before. But it was changing the word have to the word get in the following way. I have to pick up Johnny at school becomes I get to pick up Johnny at school. I have to get groceries becomes I get to get groceries. I have to go to work becomes I get to go to work. Feel the difference. One, just in a word that you may not mean in any negative way. Oh, I have to get groceries. You might say it very cheerfully and not feel at all beleaguered. But in the word is a sense of burden. I have to pick up my kid at school. Even again, if you're saying, oh, I have to pick up my kid at school, and you're not feeling negative about it. But when we change that word to I get to go to work today. I get to go pick up all the dog poop in the yard now. What does it mean? Well, maybe I get to go to work today means I'm lucky that I'm employed, hopefully at doing something that I enjoy to some degree or is wholesome. I get to pick up the dog poo instead of, I have to pick up the dog poo in the yard, becomes my dog is healthy and their GI tract works well. Like, yay, this is a good thing. It's much better to have a healthy pet whose GI tract is working well than a pet who might be ill or die from GI, gastrointestinal issues. I get to pay my taxes this month. Last month, we might have all said, instead of, I have to pay my taxes. Boy, I heard a lot of people say, just in my friendship group, I can't come over, I'm doing my taxes, I have to do my taxes. This was all around April 25th, by the way. I'm thinking, the deadline's the same every year, people, but just saying. But how do we feel when we take the same data, the taxes are due on April 30th, and we turn it into a story of burden, even a story of fear, especially if we owe taxes and we don't have the funds sitting in our bank account to pay for those taxes. And the story becomes one, at worst, of innocent victimhood and self-righteous indignation. Oh, poor me, I have to pay my taxes, the government this or that, and all the thing. Versus, oh, I get to pay my taxes. That means I live in a country with a somewhat functioning economy-ish, a somewhat functioning government-ish, and I like driving on the roads that the taxes pay for. I don't happen to have children in the school system, but many of you have in your either now or have in the past. I like that taxes help make schools work, you know. I like that I can go to the hospital and if I'm lucky it can save me from dying. So how do we interpret this? Oh, I had to pay so much tax, right? I really shouldn't be talking about taxes. I'm going to lose all the audience. No one's going to listen to me evermore. I should go back to dog poo or whatever my other one was, picking your child up at school. But the point is pretty simple. It was a couple that came into the office today, and they were in a lot of pain and suffering. They weren't being nasty to each other in that moment. They weren't fighting. They were weeping. They were just exhausted. They were feeling the threads of their beautiful marriage being pulled and fraying, and they've both thought about the marriage might not make it. They've both thought about this may be too much. And then there was, as I've said repeatedly already, this moment of awakening, this moment of freedom, where the one wife said, we chose this life, you know, the very life we're complaining about and feeling so burdened about and so angry at each other and scorekeeping on who's doing more and who's working harder and who's not doing enough and bitterly looking at the things that are not done instead of the things that are done. All of that is optional. It's in the view we take of the data. It's how we interpret the story. It's the story we tell ourselves that matters. This is critically important because if you want to be a happy person, change your story. If it's not working for you, if you want to feel more gratitude, change your story and start looking for what works and what is good in your life. You'll always find things, even when other things are really tough. You're going to find moments of beauty. You're going to find moments of grace. You're going to find moments of peace, even in the worst of times. So watch the story. And this is a very empowering teaching because imagine I'm giving you a quill pen or the world's most powerful computer or a dictaphone or whatever you want, that you have complete and utter power in this moment to change the story. You have complete and utter power to say, I am so blessed that I am married to you in the midst of this extraordinarily busy dual career, one child, multiple pets lifestyle. What a blessing, what a blessing, what a blessing. Instead of the other story that they came in with today, they started to rewrite the story without much help from me, partway through. And you could see a bit of hope, and you could see a glimmer of possibility, and you could see them saying, I don't quite know how we do that, but we could maybe do that. We could maybe rewrite the story away from, I do everything, and I'm so tired, and we're miserable, and we're not connecting, and everything's awful, and I hate my life. I've told that story far too often, including recently at times. I'm human, not a Buddha yet. So I wanted to bring that idea forward tonight. And from a Buddha Dharma point of view, we suffer when we cling to wanting things to be different instead of embracing what is. And what is will sometimes be challenging or painful or difficult. But when we fight it, when we spend so much time stuck in wanting it to be different than it is, that's a wasted life, a wasted moment, or a wasted breath, instead of saying, this is the way it is right now. And maybe it's tough, and maybe it's painful, and maybe it's challenging. But what can I do with it? How can two exhausted spouses pull together and hold each other and say, I'm so tired, babe. Oh, I am too, babe. I love you so much. Instead of, why aren't you doing more? I'm doing more. I'm so tired. You don't see me. And in the simple shift of perspective, in the simple, as she put it, reframe, we chose this life. Maybe we should stop complaining about it and find ways to pull together as a team. It could be transformational. And whether they call it Dharma or not, we could just call it wisdom. In there is a profound wisdom, which is we're creating our own suffering. The child's croup or cough that's keeping it up all night so they're both sleep deprived isn't the cause of suffering. It's not a happy thing. It's not something we want. It's certainly tough for the little munchkin who's coughing and for those that love her. But here it is. So you do the skillful things to try to cope with the situation in the child's cough and celebrate how lucky we are. How lucky we are. We get to help our child, not we have to. I have to get up with her, she's crying. I get to get up with her, she's crying. I told this couple a story of a good friend of mine who at that time was in about 2 years into a new relationship, about 5 years ago. And my friend had a very old dog who she'd had for, I think, Tartuffe was about 17 at the time. And so her new partner and her had moved in together, they were married, and she talked about how they had this sweet kind of competition in the middle of every night because the old dog needed to go out and pee, just like mine does now, at least once a night. I'm up with the old dog taking her out to pee. And her old dog needed to get out to pee. And it was such a nice story because she says, I'll call her Jane and I'll call him Bob. And so Jane said, so this is what happens in the night. One of us hears Tartuffe scrabble around. We know he needs to go out, he needs to pee. And it's like, I'll get him, honey. No, it's okay. I'll get him. No, babe, I got it. I'll let him out. No, sweetheart, I've got it. So there's like competition for who was going to be the most kind. And it was just natural because they were still in love. They were only a year or two in. They were treating each other like, I get to be with you. I get to be with you. And the dog needs out, which is no one's fault. And kindness, instead of, would you let the dog out? It's, I got him. No, honey, I've got him. It's okay, I've got him. So I shared that story and they kind of laughed in a sweet way. Like, what a nice idea that when their baby cries or is coughing right now, one of them could say, I've got her. No, honey, I've got her. And then one of them, who was very practical, said, yeah, except I'm the light sleeper. So it was always me that's going to wake up. I'd have to actually poke my wife a bunch until she was able to wake up enough to say, I'll go get her. And we had a good laugh because that's reality. What's the moral of the story? The moral of the story, to give a little tough love, is we choose our suffering. We're the author of our suffering. We create our suffering by how we tell ourselves the story about what's happening. I have to do this. This isn't right. Oh, poor me. I do it too. I'm not beating any of us up at all because I do this. I was doing it this weekend. Just in this is rough or tough or it's too much or poor me. Maybe not quite those words, but that sort of through line. And that is something we can always change. This is the very good news. I get to pick up the dog poop. I get to take my car for a tune-up. I have to take my car for a tune-up. That's annoying. It gets in the way of things I'd prefer to do. Oh, I get to take my car for a tune-up. That means you've got a car. It means you've got a place that can take care of your car. It means that you're able to make that happen. Why do we have to always turn it into a bad thing? Buddha said everything's impermanent, everything compounded falls apart. Well, your car is a compound, meaning it's made of structures that come together in causes and conditions. It's going to need tune-ups until such time as it falls apart. It's the nature of reality. If you're going to have a car, wisely, you should eventually get it tuned up the odd time. And instead of being upset about it or put out about it or feel put upon about it, you could go, oh yeah, this is a part of reality. No big deal. So some of you may have heard the phrase, I used to really like to use this phrase a couple years ago when I taught or in my own thinking about life, which is, we are story-making machines. Because that's really what we are as humans. Data comes in, mind almost instantly makes concepts, creates stories. It's not a bad thing. It becomes a difficult or even a destructive thing when we forget that we're making up stories. When we forget this is simply an interpretation of data. It's not the way it is. The way it is that I have a lazy, good-for-nothing spouse who never helps around the house. That's a variation of the stories they were each telling themselves. And guess what? Were they ever suffering? until the moment of grace, the moment of wisdom, the moment of freedom, where one of them went, we chose this life. Maybe we could approach it differently. And it's like the angel sang in that moment, because it was a moment of awakening. It was a moment of Buddha Dharma. It was a moment of clear seeing. So I want us each to think about that, and I invite us all this week to play with that simple phrase, I have to go do X, and change it to, I get to go do X. And see what it feels like at the visceral level. See what it feels like at the psychological level. See what it feels like to change the story. When we find ourselves telling a story where we're the victim of circumstance and everybody should have done it different and we were right and they were wrong and they're all terrible. What happens if you rewrite the story and say, maybe they were struggling, maybe they didn't notice, maybe that's the best they could do right now, maybe I could stay away from them if they're really challenging for me to be around right now? These are much more positive stories about the same data. The Buddha taught this most historically as Nama Rupa. Nama being the concept or the label, Rupa being the form or the object. So no doubt you've seen Lama Mark or others or myself do something where we hold something up and we say, what is this? And you guys say, it's a Buddha statue, or if you weren't clear who Buddha was, it's a statue of a man, you might say, or a woman, or an androgynous being. And yet, why do we call it that? Why is it that? Is it that? It's a concept, it's a label, it's a name we've been taught, we've learned through history that we place on things. And then we get very, very stuck that that's simply the way it is. My spouse is a lazy so-and-so who never helps. That's just the way it is. Nama Rupa, Nama Rupa. Nama is the concept, Rupa is the form or the object, or I'm calling it today the data. The data. And this is for, we'll do a whole retreat on this and months on it or weekends on it or whatever, but the more you can challenge your own thinking with love, not beating yourself up, but when you're like, I'm having a rough day. Even that's a really dumb thing to say, because the day's not over yet. Are you really having a rough day, whatever that means? What might be more accurate is in this moment the body or mind feels yucky. That might be more accurate. But does that mean you're having a rough day? No, because probably in the last, how long have we all been up now? 12 hours or something, more maybe. There's been moments in those 12, 13, 14 hours that were neutral or pleasant, right? You saw a baby kitten video on your Facebook thing. I saw one yesterday, and it was a mom kitten with like 3 or 4 tiny newborn kittens on her belly, and then the husband kitten, grown cat, they were lying together, the mom and the dad, and he had his arms around the mom cat, and the kittens were all here, and then dad cat leaned down and licked his little kittens and came back and hugged his wife. That was my story anyway. And it was really sweet, and it was really cute. So even if you were having a bad day and you saw whatever it was that for a moment or 3 distracted you and felt pleasant or nice, are you having a bad day? Well, not right now, but before and after I am. For the kitten video, I felt pretty good for 2.4 minutes. It's just to be a story that I'm having a bad day. Being in suffering in this moment may be an accurate description of the moment. I'm not saying it's not. But the story we tell ourselves, or they don't like me, that's a pretty gross story, right? They don't like me, or they're mean to me. Is there one time in 20 where they're neutral or pleasant to you? Quite likely, yes. But we tell ourselves stories, and then without realizing it's a story, we accept it as true, and then we continue as though it's true. We continue as though we're having a bad day. Ever hear of a self-fulfilling prophecy? If I'm having a bad day, and I tell myself, or you, I'm having a bad day, I'll be a little more likely to keep not feeling great than if I say, whew, it's been a roller coaster today. I'd like to have a good day from now on. There's a different story, right? I'm going to get off the couch, and I'm going to go for a walk, and I'm going to look for flowers, or I'm going to call a friend and have a nice chat about their new grandchild, or I'm going to have a small and delicious, yummy treat, or whatever it is. The really beautiful thing about what I'm saying, and people far wiser than I say, is that we can always change it. We can always change it. This is the great part of impermanence. All your bad mental states are impermanent too. All your suffering states are impermanent too. Your moments of anger, grief, brokenheartedness, fear, hunger, physical pain, they shift. They don't remain the same forever, thankfully. So I wanted to talk about that. I wanted to share the wisdom of the person on my couch who went, we chose this life. How do we reframe it? How do we change it from, oh, poor us, everything's so hard, to, oh my goodness, look what we have? Because if you'd asked either of them, I can't remember how long they've been together, maybe 5-ish years. So let's say we went back 7 years and they were both single and looking. They would have said, oh, I'd like to find someone wonderful to fall in love with. And, you know, I'd like to be in the Okanagan or South Island. And I'd like to have a baby one day. And I'd like to have a couple more dogs and cats. They've got everything they wanted. And that's what they realize today, because they're smart, loving, and curious to learn and grow, that listen to us being absolutely miserable when we've got pretty much everything we want. Does anybody else relate to that? I know I do. Sometimes I look at my blessed life, my blessed family, my blessed partner, my blessed critters, my blessed place I live, or we can look out the window and see what we're seeing right now. Beauty, beauty everywhere. And I say, why am I so unhappy then in this moment? Like just in this moment, if I'm having a tough mind state or a tough heart state. It's like, oh, what's the story? What's the reality? What's the bigger picture? This too shall pass. Yay! It's very good news. So as I was going to say driving here, but that would be inaccurate. While I was being a passenger, being driven here this evening, what do I want to talk about? What feels useful? What resonates? I had a few different ideas. And it came down to one of the most helpful teachings I've ever heard. And however, it's taught in different ways, using different language or different concepts, which is each of us is completely able to change our story. Each of us is completely able to relate to the data differently. So if the way you're relating to the data is fulfilling, it's wholesome, it leads to more compassion and calmness and curiosity and wisdom and good states, that's a pretty good story. You might want to hang on to that one for a while. Although in Dharma we don't want to hang on to anything, but you know what I mean. If the story is, oh, I'm having a bad day, or oh, nobody likes me, and all these terribly painful things I can feel too, take a gentle look at the story without beating yourself up, without saying, oh, I'm such a loser because I'm telling myself a bad story and I should know better. No, it's another terrible story. Instead, how about this story? Is what I am telling myself right now true? Is it really for sure true? Am I really having a bad day? Can I empirically prove that this is a bad day when it's only 2:11 in the afternoon? Or is what's more true is the body and or mind feel sad right now, or anxious right now, or put out, or lonely? That may have truth to it. Then be in the story of right now there is some suffering present. Right now there is some suffering present. Ow. Right now I'm going to choose to be kind to the Cheryl that's suffering. Right now I'm going to remind myself that this too shall pass. It's so different than saying I'm having a bad day. So that's what I got. That's what I wanted to share tonight, is the joyful news that we can become masters and mistresses of our own mind. And we can always, in the middle of whatever's happening, including tragic loss and the things that will befall most of our lives in different ways, that we can stop and breathe and say, this is temporary, this hurts right now, this too shall pass. Because it will. Ain't no doubt about it. And that's what I wanted to say tonight, just a short conversation. So we'll close with a moment or two of meditation, and then Neil will shut down the feed, and then we might have a little Q&A or a little check-in with those of you that are here, if you wish. but just settling in to the present moment, which is absolutely perfect. No matter what's happening, it's been a wild spring weather evening just in the last hour or so for all of us coming here, rain and then rainbows and then sun and then clouds. That's the mind too, right? So right now, in this moment, in this room or at home in your room or later if you're watching this on replay, right now, what's the weather of the mind and heart? Is it sunny and bright and calm? Is it raining and gloomy and sad and hurting? Is it stormy and tumultuous, like with angry thunderclouds? Are there rainbows of wonder and curiosity, covered with unicorns and leprechauns? Is it kind of neutral? You're not quite sure what the emotional weather is. That's legit too. But just know, much like our tumultuous spring weather here in the last month or two, or forever it feels like, it'll change. It'll change. It'll change. Now, if you're in sun and calm and peace right now, we don't want it to change, because sun and calm and peace are beautiful. They feel graceful. They feel easeful. We'd like them to stay. But I've never been able to catch sunshine in a bottle. You can just bask in it when it's there. And when it comes to the mind, you can become better at noticing the clouds on the horizon and noticing that they're wanting to come. And sometimes you'll be able to gracefully say, hey, clouds, I see you, and that's okay, but I'm going to concentrate on the sun. And sometimes the clouds will dissolve back into their place. So we'll sit with that just for a couple minutes. And we'll close, as is traditional, with what's called a dedication of the merit. By the merit of this strengthening activity, may there be a cessation of the defilements. May we see through the weather to the shining sun of awakening that is always present. May we be terrific story writers and rewrite our stories in line with wisdom and compassion. Om Ahom. Thank you for your kind attention to this story.